Okay, I'm recording.
We will call the October 19th, 2021 Planning Commission meeting to order at 6:30. Everybody please stand for the pledge of allegiance. So, has everyone had the chance to review the minutes to the 2021 meeting minutes?
Joe, let's make sure you're somewhere near a microphone.
How are we doing now?
That's much better.
Meeting minute comments.
I wasn't here, so I have no comment to the accuracy of the minutes.
Okay,
Me as well.
okay.
I move to approve the September 21st, 2021 meeting minutes.
Do I have a second?
I'll second that.
The meeting minutes for September 21st are approved, and we will now move on to the general public comments section. So this is for just general comments. This is not the public hearing that will follow up afterwards. So have we had anyone send any emails or any type of commentary prior to the, go ahead.
Staff has not received any general public comments for tonight's meeting, neither by email or by regular mail.
Okay, so the general public comments started a minute ago. I apologize. At 6:31. I will now close the general public comments at 6:33. So on to the public hearing portion of this. Now, John, is there anything that you would like to say prior to me opening the public hearing on the CPA 121-2021 comp plan amendment rezone request prior to starting the meeting?
Well, typically, before we open the public hearing part, staff gives a presentation, but if the planning commission's already read thoroughly the staff reports, then then the planning commission can just ask questions if there's any clarifications you want, or if you want staff to give some sort of overview of where we are and how we got here, I'm happy to do so.
Okay, starting to
I
my
would
left.
appreciate
Go
that.
ahead, I'm sorry, go ahead. Starting to my right, Commissioner Maddox.
I was just commenting that I would appreciate staff to comment on the issues at hand.
All right. So, this topic actually is the comprehensive plan update docket item number CPA 1-20, which includes two requests for rezones. One of them is referred to as the Ruby Golf Course rezone that was actually submitted as part of the 2020 comprehensive plan update. The Planning Commission reviewed it, made a recommendation, and it went to the City Council in 2020. City Council reviewed the Planning Commission's findings of fact and still had concerns and questions, so they sent it back to the Planning Commission for review again during the 2021 Comprehensive Plan Update cycle. So we'll be having a public hearing on that item today. The second item is the Bucko Rezone, which is a 2021 request from the Bucko family to change the zoning of their property. It's roughly 21 acres. I'll get to the details on that in a moment. To rezone their property from mixed commercial to residential 15. So I'll take these one at a time. The first one was the Bucko Rezone. I'm sorry, the first one is the Ruby Rezone, excuse me. And like I said, started last year. City Council already reviewed it and sent it back to the Planning Commission. So the Planning Commission's had a lot of information on this over the past 2 years now. We did post another public hearing comment period. We have not received any additional comments in 2021, but included with this memo is the application from 2020 and several public comments from the notice of application period last year. And we had 2 public hearings last year, and now we're having another public hearing now. So there's been a lot of opportunity for comments. Comments from last year were generally not favorable, largely because of the wetness on the property. We discussed this at the Planning Commission meeting last month, at which time the applicant, Mr. Ruby, spoke about the project, and so hopefully you've had a chance to read the minutes and or listen to the recording from the last Planning Commission meeting, which is up on the Planning Commission meetings materials page. So we'll open a public hearing on that one first, and we'll just have them have the 2 public hearings separately, so as not to confuse matters. Was there anything specific more that the Planning Commission wanted to learn about this? Staff did not produce a whole lot of new information about this project, since there was a lot of comments and material given during the 2020 Planning Commission hearings process, and that was all provided in this memo, and so it should all be there for the Planning Commission to review. Last year, the staff didn't make any sort of recommendation. This year, we're coming down a little more on the side of concern about the loss of mixed commercial land. As I've talked to the Planning Commission about many times, and as the Planning Commission's well aware, when we set our urban growth area boundaries, we did an analysis of how much land we have in the city that's available for residential and commercial land. And then we also looked at our projected 20-year population projections and our 20-year employment growth populations. And we made sure that back in 2016, that last time we updated our urban growth area boundaries, that we had enough zoning to accommodate the projected growth. And not only do we have enough zoning, it's very close, with some 25% market rate factors built in. So in essence, it's roughly 25% bigger than, the urban growth area is roughly 25% bigger than what it strictly needs to be to accommodate all of our projected growth. So if we go changing zoning on large pieces of land, what we need to do is make, rebalance the amount of commercial and residential. So this is a request to eliminate some commercial land and add more residential land. So now now we're starting, that tips the scales a little, showing that we'll have more residential land necessary for our 20-year growth projection and less commercial land is necessary for our 20-year employment projection. And this will hold true for all zoning requests. I did an analysis in here saying that there's about 2 to 2.8 acres of developable land on this 3-acre piece after you take away for buffers, for critical areas and easements for the gas line. And so that's the net effect would be that. Eric, are you?
Yeah, I do have a question pertinent to the whole zoning and losing acreage as far as mixed commercial.
Yeah.
So I realize that this one particular piece is 3 acres, and try not to venture too far into the second half, but, between this and the Bucko changing from mixed commercial to residential, and I don't know how the area where the mixed-use overlay is, but is that mixed commercial too? And how does that factor in as far as lost acreage on mixed commercial land within the city?
So the urban village mixed-use overlay is over mixed commercial land. It is commercial land. However, we're not changing any urban village mixed-use overlay designations. We're keeping that the same.
Right. I wasn't sure how that factored in as far as I realized that it's designated mixed commercial, but I didn't know if by putting the overlay on it, if that technically changes its status as far as the urban growth act is concerned, or does that just technically continue on as?
It definitely creates more opportunity for residential land, which, we haven't, how that affects the residential population projection, that actually puts less pressure on the existing residentially zoned lands if some residential is being now built in that overlay. So that would actually, as more and more gets built in the urban village mixed use, it stands to reason, although we haven't done a full analysis of the impact, but it would stand to reason that there would be even less necessity for residential land, new residential land in the urban growth area.
Okay.
But to get to his question, I think the way I heard him was how much do we lose out of that 40 acres? Just even, we have 2 projects that are going in right now. So we're going to lose a bit of mixed commercial capacity just based upon the 2 current applicants in the Uvmu, and I think that was your question.
No, exactly. I mean, considering the fact that between the 2 properties that are asking to be rezoned, that's 8 acres of mixed commercial that's now has to be made up somewhere. And then, adding on top of that exactly what Joe just said is kind of what I was trying to get at, trying to get a grasp of, like, how much do we have to make up for that somewhere?
Yeah, like between the 2 zoning requests to eliminate mixed commercial without any plan to create more mixed commercial anywhere does cause problems with our, commercial allotment. As far as the impact of the development in the urban village mixed use, there is some commercial component to that. So we are getting commercial in there, although there is the opportunity for residential behind some of the the commercial part that may have an impact, but we haven't seen any requests for that yet.
Okay. Thank you.
One last question that I have before we just go around the table again. How do you reduce for a type 3 fish-bearing stream from 110 feet to 55 feet? How do you actually mitigate that? That's a 50% reduction.
So when you have a situation where there's a 110-foot buffer, but it's
Right.
non-usable habitat. It's basically, you've got something that's mowed lawn or blackberry briar
Right,
or
right, right.
farm or something that's not good habitat. As part of the project, the developer has the option to mitigate down to 55 by making that remaining 55 feet of buffer a high-functioning habitat. So that's putting native plants in.
I totally get it. So they put a wetlands plan together and they present it to the city. We're going to pull out the blackberries and this is what we're going to replant. And that's how you get your setback reduction.
Yeah, so
Yeah, right
you're
on,
basically
okay.
turning it from non-functioning habitat
Yeah,
to highly functioning habitat. And, if you don't do that mitigation, if you just take the standard 110-foot setback, you don't have to do anything to that. You don't have to do anything to that buffer area. You just leave it as it is. So it's actually a net benefit to see with the reduction, a smaller buffer with better plantings is better habitat.
So do we require a bonding and a monitoring? Like,
Oh,
for
yeah,
instance,
there's a whole.
yeah, like Stonehenge County has
There's
3 years
a whole long
out.
section
Yeah,
in the
yeah,
critical
yeah,
areas
yeah,
ordinance
yeah.
about what needs to be
Because
done.
blackberries are coming right on back.
Right, that's not allowed.
Yeah, okay. That was it. Anybody have any additional questions? Go ahead, Silas.
So, I'm just unclear exactly what the city council is looking for here. I mean, I missed last meeting, and so I might be a little bit behind, but, we recommended, I think, approving the rezone last go-around, is that correct?
Correct.
There was a little bit of dissension on the planning commission, but my recollection of the discussion was that most of the opposition to the rezone was less about the changing and zoning designation and mostly about people just not wanting that property to be developed in the first place. And so, is there something, ultimately, the city council has the call on this. We're not a legislative body here, and so what are they looking for a different recommendation than what we recommended before? I mean, we went back and forth about this for a long time, and I understand your argument about mixed commercial, but whether it's developed in mixed commercial or R5, it's going to anger the people who live around it. They don't, and so the city council ultimately can do whatever they want with this, right?
Yeah, they could have chosen to go either way. I think, my intuition on it is they wanted to see a better process. And I think what that means is better documentation of the process. So they can see the process. They didn't specifically state that they wanted to see a different result. Because you're right, the city council can take your recommendation or not take your recommendation. So the important part is the process and what they see comes out of the process.
I don't think we're making any decisions tonight. However, exactly what you're saying, and I wrote down a couple of different, we have other tools in our so-called shed here outside of the straight zones. In these two particular rezones, we've identified the integration, or how should we more seamlessly integrate useful commercial services into a residential existing component, as well as potentially looking at a UVMU, not nowhere near the residential capacities that we agreed to on that. But maybe this is a good time to take a look at the mixed commercial zone in general and see if we can maybe tighten that up or do things such as overlays or proposed sub-area plans that you have that existing code. However, if you're in that proximity to maybe X amount of housing, well, guess what? I don't want to see certain businesses that aren't consumer business service or consumer-oriented services in general. In essence, I don't think, I don't want to pick on any particular industry, but there are absolutely things that can integrate really well with residential areas that people who live in the residential areas would appreciate having something a lot closer by than rolling down to Highway 20 to pick up, whether it's a prescription, a bagel, a cup of coffee, whatever. But there are absolutely services that maybe that's something we should look at. Like I said, we're not making any decisions tonight on exactly, I don't believe, what we're looking to do. But maybe we want to open up that particular zone in general and discuss that further, since we do have quite a bit of experience in modifying that with that that urban village mixed use overlay that we did. So I'm just throwing that out there. Any comments on that before I open the public hearing? Or is this a good time to?
Well, I guess
go ahead.
I'd just like to maybe know from staff, what would they like to see differently about our process from last time? I mean, I feel like we beat this one around for quite a while, and I don't know what, is it something like finding other, I mean, I share staff's concern about losing mixed commercial zoning in the city. I think that's, but I don't, so is it like an issue of replacing that, or what, if we want this rezone to go forward, or is it like what Joe said, maybe, because when they come and ask for a rezone to R5, that's different than saying, hey, we'd like to rezone this. Like if we come back and say, I don't know if we even can come back and say, oh, we give you an urban village mixed-use overlay or some other type of zoning besides what you've asked for. So, anyway, I guess I'm still just a little foggy on what.
Like I said, I think it may come down to documentation of the process.
Okay.
The vote was 3-2 last time. That, you know, wasn't a full planning commission that day. I don't know if
see.
that had something to do with it, but
Okay.
I think some of the concerns were the density and the flooding capacity, and we didn't have the capacity to handle the surface water. So as I was kicking this around in my own mind, back to that, potentially looking at the mixed commercial side to tweak that a little bit, but also require more open space. So in the case of the Ruby property, since it borders a significant parcel, the trade-off would potentially be to combine the commercial services for residents and, like I said, not a density like it did with Uvmu, where then the offset would be the development group would be required to have a greater open space that could potentially control more flooding or incorporate different techniques into that open space area to allow what you would have been doing on the entire parcels if you did R5 straight across the board, but have a mixed type of, let's say, a housing style is similar to what we did in PRD, right? So we have the ability to do townhouses, we can do single families. We don't have commercial in a PRD outside of the size, that's right. But we definitely have tools that we've worked on that I think it's not going to be apples to apples, but it's kind of looking at different options that we've had to make things work, to make it work better at the end of the day. So that's why I'm throwing that out on the table, because I did give this quite a bit of thought. What do people want, and how do we preserve what we're looking to preserve instead of just the one-size-fits-all type of policy? And we've done that before. I think we've done a really good job. And the PRD and the urban village mixed use are two great examples. We have experience in this, is what I'm saying. So we could talk more about this, but I'd like to open up the public hearing at this particular point. So anybody have any other additional comments before I move forward?
Yeah.
So we are going to open the public hearing concerning CPA-1-21-2021 comp plan amendments, including the two-zone rezone requests at 6:56 PM tonight. Now, if someone is here to make a comment, please give us your name, address, and just introduce yourselves, and the microphone is yours. Do we have anybody that's signed in, by the way?
We don't have
Yes,
sign-in
Jeff.
sheet.
Yeah.
And hey, Bill, do I have anybody online that would like to,
Yeah, I'm online.
you're online, okay, but does,
So it looks like we have two people online that would like to speak, so.
okay,
Go ahead, Paul.
I think this guy also.
Yeah, we'll choose Paul Cock.
Can you hear me?
yes.
Hear you well.
Okay, good, thank you. Yeah, my name is Paul Cock, C-O-C-K-E. My wife and I live at 975 Wedmore Place. We own our house here. We've lived here for about 20 years. We frequently walk along Brickyard Creek and up Fruitdale, and every winter, without fail, the golf course floods. In fact, one of our sons, we raised 5 kids here, he worked at the golf course and he remembered being up to his knees in water during the winter. So we're very concerned that this is a swampy place, and when all the water comes down off of the housing development above it, that all that surface water hits the golf course. You add more impermeable surfaces, that it'll all go into Brickyard Creek, and Brickyard Creek floods every winter during the rainy season, and all that water will end up coming down Calkin Street and Wedmore Street, which are at a lower elevation. We're also very concerned about additional development that could impact traffic along McGargyle in particular, and Fruitdale. My wife and I walked along Fruitdale today, saw a police officer. The speeding along Fruitdale is terrible. Speeding along McGargyle is terrible. It's gotten worse since the development farther south near Independence. Children walk along that regularly, and so do many people getting to school. We see more traffic. And flooding. We also have significant concerns about any further development at the golf course. We've lived near gas pipelines for 20 years. We've been afraid of gas pipelines for 20 years, and we're concerned about any development near there. We would also be opposed to any reduction of the fish habitat. A high priority of the state of Washington is to protect salmon and other fisheries. Anything that diminishes that, we would be opposed to. Is that my time? Something beeped. We're also very concerned about any potential impact on the wetlands across the street in Fruitdale. And, you know, the last, but maybe not as considered, is the fact that this is the only golf course in Sedro-Woolley. People play golf on it all the time. Sedro-Woolley is not exactly brimming with recreational amenities. Getting rid of the only golf course, there'll never be another golf course in Sedro-Woolley, I think would be a mistake. So those are my comments. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah, Jeffrey Chappelle. Can you hear me?
Yeah, go, Jeffrey, just name, address, serial number kind of thing.
Yeah, Jeffrey Chappelle, 1265 Arizo Drive, Sedro-Woolley, Washington. I'm a practitioner at the hospital at Skagit Valley. I worked at United General Hospital as well over the years, and have been a resident here for 15 years now. To start with, I want to let you know that the notice of public hearing that was sent out to the public, there were incorrect information on the publication. So if you follow the rule, if you follow the addresses, the website addresses on here, you didn't have the information to get onto this website. So I know several, at least probably 40 or 50 people that probably tried to get on, don't know a lot about computers, but weren't able to access this meeting simply because the notice of the public hearing was incorrect. So I want to make sure that's clear, because I tried it several times based on that, and then I was, of course, able to go in, to the Sedro-Woolley public hearing department and all that and find it, but lots of people didn't. So you're not going to hear from a lot of people that did want to talk tonight. So that's important to have that down, that we may want to look at readdressing this again, maybe in public. Hopefully the whole COVID stuff, as we're, kind of hopefully on the zone going down, we can meet in person, which would be great. But so that's my first point.
Hey, Jeffrey, can you hold on a second? That might be a procedural thing that we'll discuss after this. So say what you're going to say, and the fact that you put this on the record, and I think you've given us an example of that. We'll run by it and talk with our technical staff to figure out if we want to do a secondary meeting. But I think that's valid if, in fact, we published the wrong information. But right now, I can't confirm that. However, you were heard, so continue on with your testimony, and we'll revisit that afterward with consultation with staff. Is that okay?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
Absolutely. I totally agree. Thank you so much. My first concern is the Washington State Wetlands Survey. And if one has been, an official survey has been done, and if that is accessible to the community members, I haven't heard anybody really talk about that as far as having an official Washington State Wetlands survey of the community. And as Paul had talked about, with the flooding issues that we've had over the years, several times a year, it would be, I think, very interesting to see that. But I don't know, can you, have we gotten a Washington State Wetlands survey to this point?
So finish your comments and we can address some of those factors.
Okay. So that's my first question. Have we gotten an official, diagnostic Washington State Wetlands survey to look at the creeks that are coming through there, the amount of water going through there, the foliage, everything else? That's a main concern of me and my family. But secondly, we are also concerned about the flooding, as Paul talked about, and where that water is going to go. I just don't know, and I haven't heard any answers as to how or what the Planning Commission has figured out as far as diverting that water. We know if you lived here long enough, it floods 3 or 4 times a year, and it's almost the entire golf course. So that is the second issue. And the third issue is in and out egression from the community up here on Arizo down Portobello to Fruitdale, trying to get out in the morning, going to work. I drive to Skagit Valley Hospital every morning, and I leave from anywhere from 5:30 to 7:30, depending on my schedule. And the traffic has gotten ridiculous, where it's doubled my transport time into Mount Vernon. And it's mainly from here to Sedro-Woolley, and particularly from here to Highway 20. So that's going to be a huge issue with if there are emergencies, getting emergency vehicles in here, people trying to get to work on a timely fashion. Those sort of issues we need to really look at. And at this point, I don't think they've been addressed. So with that, will be concluded.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Bill, do we have anyone else online?
Yeah, I finally got online for William Stevens, but I think much of what Mr. Chaufel has.
Could you restate your name and your address?
Oh, I'm sorry. It's William Stevens, 1259 Rezone Drive, Sedro-Woolley. and much of what he has shared already is related to what I wanted to say, was just basically what they're going to do with most of the golf course, in addition to the flooding that takes place. How are they going to mitigate a lot of the things that they have to deal with? Also, there is for the whole neighborhood, there's a drainage canal that goes right along the edge of the bottom of the bluff. And how are they going to mitigate that? Because we have, that's something that was provided for the community when they built these houses, for the drainage. And one of them is a pond. It's a pond over across Portobello. And so, it's like, I don't think enough arrangements have been made to deal with that drainage, which empties into a pond on the golf course. Are they just going to dig all that up? What are they going to do? What are their plans for it?
Yeah, I'm just gonna, there's a process prior to any permits being issued. So at this particular point and this part of this meeting, it's just to get everybody on board and make their comments. So that's why we're quiet. It's not like we're not hearing you. This is just part of the process right now that everybody speaks, both online and in person here. And then we'll get to what was communicated thereafter, after I close the public meeting. But you are heard.
Okay.
Thank you. Bill, anyone else online?
Oh, on his line.
Yeah.
And Bill Stevens' wife, Manette, and I would like to, well, what are they going to do about the increased population in the school as well as traffic? And we don't want them to rip those trees out and create soil erosion either.
Right.
And I don't know if that's been mentioned before.
Well, I don't know if they're going to build anything as far as or do anything as far as the hillside. But if they try that, then that's going to cause erosion on the hillside.
And how long will this process take?
Sometimes this process can take a couple of years, depending on the involvement of everyone. So there's no slam dunks on anything, and that's why these public meetings are very important, that people do show up and they do voice their opinions, their concerns, because a lot of times you find that you have that direct knowledge by living in a location to provide input to everyone here. So it is important that people become involved. So again, Manette, do you have anything else to say, or can I move on?
I was going to make one comment.
Oh,
It was
keep going.
extremely difficult. It was extremely difficult to get on this system. And I don't think it was the best thought out method for us to talk to one another, but I don't know how he finally did it, but he finally got on.
Actually, it was Mr. Chaufel that got me on finally to the right location, but there was no link or anything for this to call in or do anything. It's like anybody that tried to call in was not able to get involved at all.
That was noted, and it will be discussed. That was not dropped at all. Thank you. So, Mrs. Stevens, do you have anything else to add, or can I move on?
Question.
Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, this is Jeffrey Chappelle. I have one more question. Okay to talk?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, since, we weren't able to get on at the very beginning of this Zoom meeting, I would just like to, now, is it Bill Chambers? Are you running this Zoom meeting?
So Bill's the IT, and he's controlling the, helping with the internet technology stuff. But Joe Fatizzi's the chair of the planning commission. He's running the meeting.
Okay.
What's the name, please? I need to have it so I can write it down, please.
I'm Commissioner Fatizzi. I'm the chairman, and Bill Chambers is our technical advisory manager that is making sure that people do have the ability via Zoom to participate in this meeting.
Okay, and how do you spell the last name, Commissioner?
F as in Frank, Attizzi, and I believe if you go to the City of Sedro-Woolley's website, my smiling face and email and everything is there.
Okay.
I understand. I got it. I just wanted to make sure because, like I said, I was trying to sign on for, I don't know, at least half an hour, if not 40 minutes, and I've exhausted myself with the publications that we've gotten. So, but I know that's noted that we were unable. A lot of the community was unable to get on this Zoom meeting, and we've addressed that already. But I just want to make sure I have your name so I can give you a call in the future. Possibly.
This was noted. You know what? That's
Not
fine.
really.
That's what we're here for, right?
So the best place to make comments is to contact staff, either myself, John Coleman, or Nicole McCowan, our assistant planner. And, we're in the office 8 to 5 every day on weekdays. You can call or email, and, we're going to be the best contacts to answer any questions you have about the project itself or the request itself. And I believe that's also noted in the materials.
And William, I would have referred you to John.
Okay.
Okay.
This is Paul. I forgot to make one other comment. Can I add it, or is I might too?
Go ahead. Go ahead.
Yeah, I'm not a geologist, but I followed, for example, the expansion of the Bellingham waterfront, and there was a lot of concern about the potential for liquefaction during an earthquake. And my understanding, and people who've lived in this area longer than I, that the golf course used some filled dirt or, filled in swamp. So I would be concerned in the case of a pronounced earthquake, and we are in, we have a subduction zone right off the coast, that not only would an earthquake damage the gas pipeline, but it could liquefy soil. So I just wonder if that's been considered at all.
So
Thank you.
like I said, everybody gets to comment, and I'd just like to keep moving on here. And everything is noted here, so everything is part of your public testimony and will be considered by the staff that actually has the expertise in addressing these issues. So thank you, and I'm ready to, unless we have anyone else online, I'm ready to move in-house here. I know Mr. Ruby's here, and I have an individual on my left here. Oh, okay, there you go. The gangsters are here. Anyway, so Paul or Bob, who would like to step up first? Introduce yourself, please.
Hi, everybody. My name is Paul Woodmansey, owner of BYK Construction. My address is 702A Metcalf Street, our business address. I think I would support.
We're turning volume up. We can't hear online.
I bet that's not even on.
Yeah, no sign.
Yeah, we can't hear anything online. So the volume needs to be turned up at the podium. Please.
Okay. Hello? Can you hear me now?
We can hear you
Now
now.
we can hear.
Okay, my name is Paul Woodmansey with BYK Construction. Address is 702A Metcalf Street. I would support this rezone of this property, even though I'm not involved. And my main reason is because as BYK Construction, we actively don't buy property in the mixed commercial zone. The zone is very difficult to develop in. It doesn't give a whole lot of options, specifically 8 units per building in residential, and in the mixed commercial is very difficult to make pencil. I think, Commissioner Fatizzi, your comment and kind of alluding to the fact that there are other tools in our tool belt of maybe changing the mixed commercial zone should be something that you as a team should really look into. You guys have done a phenomenal job with the PRD review. You did a great job with the VMU review. And I think that you guys could check out the mixed commercial zone and make it a zone that's something that's worth developing in. So, thank you.
Thanks. Mr. Ruby, you're next.
Thank you. Can I be heard?
Absolutely.
Great. Bob Ruby, I'm with Granite Holdings, who's entitled to the property. My address is 801 Metcalf Street here in Sedro-Woolley. Kind of to take off on what Paul Woodmansey had said, I know that there was discussion about mixed commercial last time, and I went back and did some additional and requested some additional study of that, and identified essentially that given the specific nature and a high level of market saturation, and by that I mean a limited market for that compared with the alternative proposal at a price that includes a dwelling unit plus additional building, makes it a more tenuous business investment. Now, it's impossible to say exactly where that demand will peak out at. But for instance, our proposal is to put affordable, single-family residential housing. That's why we're requesting the rezone. To remain with mixed commercial, hypothetically, were it all to be commercial with an attached dwelling unit, will make the cost of the same dwelling unit 150% or more. And what that does is, A, it takes it out of affordability, and B, it puts it into a much smaller, much more specialized market segment. So the idea is that especially with the need of affordability in housing, this subdivision is for a level of housing that is as affordable as anything is in the area, in the county, and in town here. So I do appreciate Mr. Woodmansey's comment on that. I've heard other comments. I'm changing the subject. I know there's a lot of concern, as I have concerns. I've heard flooding, liquefaction, fish habitat, traffic, the only golf course, on and on and on. I know Mr. Coleman last year was very good at addressing that in as much as those issues are and can be handled either under the code and or by engineering. So to take one issue, I know that flooding is a concern out there. Frankly, not just the rezone, but any development that occurs out there will mitigate to the point of eliminating any flooding that's out there. It would have to, or it wouldn't be suitable for residential housing construction. As far as the only golf course, it is, but the fact of the matter is that there is a development application that's been submitted to the city, and it's been accepted by the city. So we are working through that, and that will include all of the requirements in order to finish the plat. So I could go on and on here, except to say that it would appear that the comments made to date are on this tonight are those comments that will have to be addressed anyway. I humbly remind you that tonight's exercise is on the rezone. And I'm speaking in support, and I encourage you to approve the rezone as submitted. Thank you.
Thank you. So do we have anyone else that would like to testify on behalf of CPA 121, 2021? If no, the public hearing is now closed.
At least for the
Go
Ruby
ahead.
rezone, not for the full CPA.
I'm just reading off number one. I could go through this entire paragraph. I'm just going to close.
This is RZ 2020-012. This is the Ruby Golf Course rezone part.
I figured we were just combining it all into one, so I haven't seen anybody here for the
No, we
Bucko.
we haven't moved into the Bucko stuff.
Okay, that's fine. I thought we were doing both of them at the same time. My bad. Okay, so we'll now move on to 2021-038 for the Bucko rezone request. Do we have anyone online that would like to testify?
Are we totally done with the other one, or?
I believe we
The
are.
planning commission have an opportunity to comment after we go revisit Bucko, or?
Yeah, however the planning commission wants to, maybe, it makes sense to finish up with this topic before we move on to the next one, but if you
I'll allow
want
that,
to.
absolutely. Sure, go ahead.
Okay, I would just like to say that, first of all, for the public in here, this rezone is just that, a rezone. It seems like it's actually reducing density, really. If this property was developed as mixed commercial, which is currently allowed, and somebody could come and ask the city for a building permit tomorrow to develop this as a mixed commercial zone, it would allow much greater density, or at least somewhat greater density than the R5 zone currently allows. And so most of the comments that I heard this evening were about matters that seemed separate from the question that's before the Planning Commission currently. And my personal opinion at this point is that the property in question could benefit from a certain type of commercial activity, but would probably be more in the character of the community if it was in residential and single-family residential or multifamily as allowed by the R5 zone. So that's my 2 cents on the matter.
Anyone else? So I did give it a bit of thought, and I do have some notes here. So when I looked at our land use 5-5, I kind of disagree with it, that they're not incompatible. And that's why I made some notes here to maybe, not even maybe, to revisit the mixed commercial zone, to find out and explore ways of integrating residential with the consumer-based service end of it that people are going to need. Now, and I agree with you, Silas, I think that you can get a better density in there than that R5 zone if we tweak things and take a look at things of how it could get to work with input from our development community and the people that have been very supportive of things that we've done in the past. So as far as providing the ability from an economic standpoint to get finance, to do something, to put affordable housing, everything that was discussed, we definitely have tools in our toolbox to take a look at ways of modifying that. Just going straight R5 with all the comments that we've heard from the different people that have testified. Flooding's a big issue, and I agree. It's going to need to be resolved before even a stick is put up there. However, you might be able to have your cake and eat it too, if we can take a look at things of how maybe we can make something work better. Because the Bucko Rezone is looking for a very similar thing. And that is a big point here, is taking away out of our mixed commercial capacity requirement, that calculations that smarter people than I have put together, we're going to need in our inventory. So we got a lot to think about. Anyone else?
John, I had a question about an earlier comment you made about the UGA basically kind of having a 25% sort of allowance there that exceeds the 20-year projection. So does that also, you did say that the mixed commercial and residential kind of allowances were pretty close, but would it be safe to assume that there is, some leg room in there for these types of rezones that, would not overall, negatively impact it, at least in the short term? Obviously, the comp plan has to be revisited and updated periodically and these sorts of things adjusted, but with that buffer like that, or am I off?
I mean, the buffer's equal across all zones, so if you change one zone, you reduce one zone, now, say you reduce that zone, now you have not enough, and you've got way too much of a buffer built in. For example, if you increase the amount of, say, residential land, now you have way more land than you can justify. The buffer is a state allowed 25% market rate factor. That's for people that, just not everybody's ready to develop in this time period, for example. So that takes into account that. So I don't think that buffer was meant to accommodate these sorts of changes to the amount of urban growth area and the type of each zone.
Thank you.
This is Manette again. I'm concerned I don't want to be living behind a gas station and a bunch of stores because we live above the golf course on Fruitdale. And
Joe?
so that kind of concerns me.
Ma'am?
And what is Bucko?
Ma'am, you've had your testimony. We're moving on to the next items, but we will have the ability to revisit this again. We're going to discuss that. So at this point, we've heard your comments, and it's not a really open format right now, so we're just moving along through our agenda. And you always have the opportunity to add into your testimony by sending an email to Planner Coleman or the planning in general, and they'll be able to get back to you on things or point you in the direction as things develop as to where to find those answers and have more commentary on it. Because typically what happens when a proposal comes in and permits are coming in, there's a public comment period that you'll have all day long to take a look at things and question it as long as you would like. But right now, we need to move on. So thank you. Anyone else have any more commentary on the Ruby rezone?
I have a couple of questions.
Go ahead.
I was actually just wondering to myself, how would people feel if commercial was built there? He wants to change it to residential. Apparently, it seems like they don't want that either. But my opinion is that most of the people are against it, and why? I mean, I haven't heard one person for it except for the person who wants it. Was the land purchased as mixed commercial?
So
Yes? Yes. Okay. And would the golf course, is the golf course being closed altogether anyway, or?
I didn't comment
So-
on that while I was at the podium, but the answer is no, it's still operating. It does not have what they call high traffic.
Right.
It's not in demand. There's a fellow that is running it. He does it, I won't say it's a hobby, but it's a
Okay.
lifestyle choice.
Okay. Yeah,
Because otherwise.
but this is it would stay open even if this was changed to residential then?
So-
It would.
Okay.
But eventually, the inevitability is the golf course, it will go away as a result of the development.
So
Right.
there's two different things that are happening in the world related to the golf course right now. That one is this project and one is a development project. So since a lot of the questions that we've been getting are very specific about the impacts to the ground, I'm going to step back and give a reminder of what we're reviewing today is a request to change the zoning of the 3 acres at the northeast corner of the property, which is the driving range area, roughly the clubhouse, everything north of the pipeline, and everything east of the creek. So it's as far as the overall golf course property, this is a very limited to that
Right.
northeastern 3-acre piece. And it is that part of the golf course is zoned as mixed commercial. That's where the clubhouse is. The request is to change from that 3 acres from mixed commercial to residential 5, which mixed commercial allows for anything that's commercial, like a convenience store or an office or a gas station, or in this case, a small grocery store because it's only 3 acres. Whereas the residential 5 zone is the typical 1 residence per 8,400 square feet, or under a planned residential development. You've probably heard the term tonight, PRD. You can get those lots down to smaller by averaging lots and providing more open space throughout the entirety of the project. So what this request is just this limited 3-acre area, and it's actually not a development request, it's a change in zoning request. So the result of any action on this proposal, this request, is not to put something on the ground. It's just to change the zoning of the land so future uses could be different than what they currently could be under the mixed commercial zone. So that said, this 3-acre piece is mixed commercial, so it couldn't be single-family residential buildings on it. Now, the remainder of the golf course is already R5, and that's why the request is for this 3 acres to match the remainder of the golf course zoning. Separate from this rezone request, there is already, in fact, a development application for a subdivision of the remainder of the golf course. That would impact the roughly 30 acres, 25 to 30 acres, I believe, of the actual golf course. And that is a development application. So that is, there is a proposal to actually put something on the ground for the remainder of the golf course. That does not affect the slope. There's no proposals for any work on the slope. There's no proposal to do anything to the drainage canal that goes to the stormwater pond that serves the Sauk Mountain View Estates subdivision above. And that subdivision request has also been noticed to the public and posted on site. And so we're going through that process simultaneously. So it makes sense that there is some misunderstandings about what is actually being heard here today. If this rezone request on the 3 acres were to be approved and it were to be allowed to be changed to R5, then it would stand to reason that this remaining 3 acres would become residential to match the rest of the residential development on the golf course that is been requested, should it be approved. And that has not been approved, and there has not been a public hearing for that yet. Now, getting back to this, should it be approved, it would be R5 like the rest of the golf course. If it's not approved, it would remain as mixed commercial, in which case it would have to be some sort of commercial use. But there is no proposal for actually any development on this 3 acre piece right now. We're just talking about the rezone.
So if it was rezoned, you could put an extra 10 to 14 units.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
on
Yeah, I
there, and
understand
that's
that
in
part.
the report.
Yeah. Thanks, John.
Now, because I'm kind of going down the list of things that people had asked about, because this proposal is just about zoning, we don't look specifically at the impacts of any use on the land because there is no use, it's just the proposed zoning. It is well understood that there is a creek adjacent, there is a gas line adjacent, and there are likely wetlands on the site. As a sidebar, because people are interested, the entire golf course site is being studied for the extent of wetlands on site. That work is being done as the season is wetter, so that will be ongoing over the next few months. And so we don't have the results of that yet, but we will be finding out the full extent. And we've been working with the applicant on this for quite some time. So we don't have any concrete answers about what's a wetland and what's not a wetland right now, but we intend to get to the bottom of that and have that all figured out over the next several months. That doesn't necessarily have any impact on this rezone request, although it is good to understand, it's very important to know that the conditions of the site is generally wet. This 3-acre piece, has the clubhouse in the parking lot and a good part of the driving range. So keep that in mind for those that are familiar with the site. Similarly, the flooding issues. The flooding issues are going to be an issue whether it's mixed commercial or whether it's R5. So we're well aware of the flooding issues, and it's been documented. And engineering may or may not be able to address those flooding issues. Those sorts of things will be handled at the development stage. So when a proposal for development, like of a building or something on the site actually is in hand. And we are going through that process on the remainder of the golf course where there actually is a development application, but we're trying to keep that separate from this rezone issue. But, we're human, we see it as all tied together. So I want to be clear about the differentiation of the golf course, the larger golf course subdivision development request, which is not what we're talking about today, and the rezone request on the 3 acres that we are talking about today. So I hope that clarifies the issue that is fairly muddy and to most people.
Thank you.
Thank you, John.
I'm ready to move on to the Bucko rezone. So, Bill, do we have anyone online that is looking to testify?
What time would we like to open?
Yeah, I was just going to do a general open, but I can open and close both if you would like. That's fine. So,
Well, I have that the previous opened public hearings opened at, I have it here somewhere on my scribbled notes, and ended at 7:22 or so. And we'll get that all sorted out with the minutes, but it's nice to state what time we opened the Bucko hearing. And would the Planning Commission or public in general like staff to speak about the Bucko rezone before we open up the actual public comment part?
I would say yes,
Yes,
since,
please.
yes.
Okay. Let me gather my notes here a moment. So we're moving on to the second part of the comp plan rezone request docket, and this is file RZ 2021-038. It's a request to change zoning of 2 assessors parcels from mixed commercial to R15. This piece of land, if you look at page 8 and 9 of the memo, is on the north side of Cook Road, but mostly behind some residential and commercial uses along there. It's roughly to the north of the food pavilion development in that area along Cook Road. So west of Edward R. Murrow Road, north of Cook Road. And this property, like I said, is 5.21 acres. It's owned by the Bucko family. And since it does have a panhandle piece of land that goes down to Cook Road, and that is its primary access. That's about 40 feet wide. This property has been in the Bucko family for many years. Mr. Adolph Bucko requested that this property be zoned mixed commercial back in 2008. And as part of the overall city-wide rezoning that the city underwent back in that time, this 5.21 acre piece of property was zoned mixed commercial to match the properties along its southern frontage that are in between this property and Cook Road, to create a larger piece of developable commercial land for a larger scale development. Since that time, the city has also been working on an arterial route to connect the Jones Road with the John Liner Road, and then that will connect down to Cook Road. So it's creating a bypass route through the northern part of the city, north of Highway 20, to alleviate traffic congestion on Highway 20 and on Highway 9. As you can see on the drawing on page 11, it shows that arterial route heading from the north easterly a little bit and then south connecting to Cook Road. That road is being developed as part of a larger subdivision just north of this rezone request area. So again, we've got 2 different issues. We've got a rezone request on a piece of property, and adjacent to that, also owned by the same people, is a subdivision. Much like the previous discussion we had, there's a subdivision going along with a rezone on adjacent properties. Now, this arterial being developed through here will give arterial access to this property, and it will no longer be, sort of hanging out back there off of a little panhandle. It will have direct access off of a city street, and in fact, a city arterial. Staff has the same concerns that I talked about earlier tonight of this is zoned mixed commercial. If it were to be rezoned to R15 in this case, which is a 15 unit per acre apartment type development request, that's what's allowed in that zone, we would be further losing more mixed commercial land, which makes it more difficult for the city to accommodate its projected 20-year economic and jobs growth projections, while at the same time adding a lot of extra residential units to our equation, therefore putting us well over the amount of residential land that we're projected to need to accommodate our growth. Our growth has been on target. We're not shooting way above our projected 20-year projections. Largely, we are definitely going through a growth spurt right now. But, between now and 2016, there was not a lot of growth. And that's how development occurs. It comes in fits and spurts. And so staff is very concerned about losing a significant piece of mixed commercial land, that does have access to, will have access to an arterial road, and if connected with the properties to the south, create a large development opportunity for a bigger development such as a smaller mall type thing. Not holding our breath anticipating a big box store, but that this would be the kind of property that would be available for a big box store should they accumulate a handful of parcels together. I gave some facts and figures in this memo stating how many this would, if adding this 5.2 acres to the R15 would skew the balance of residential land. It would be able to accommodate additional 78 units. So according to our Office of Financial Management demographic data in 2021, the average number of persons per unit is 2.61 persons per unit. So what this rezone would accommodate roughly 203 residents, and that's 203 residents more than we've accounted for in our growth projections. We projected between 2016 and 2036 an additional 4,555 residents.
And that wouldn't even include the prior rezone to an R5. That's on top of that.
Right. So in addition of 2003 is not an insignificant amount. That's quite a bit more. So we're very concerned about losing mixed commercial, and you might say it's just 3 acres or it's just 5 acres, and now we're suffering death by 1,000 cuts. We don't see that this meets our comprehensive plan goals, reducing the amount of mixed commercial land. In addition, the property to the north and east is residential 7. Properties to the west is public, that's the school zone, and south is mixed commercial. So this would be one little inholding of R15 land tucked into a random area. It's not a well-planned location for R15 adjacent to other R15s, R15 zoning. It really looks on its face to be a spot zone. So we're not, staff's not seeing that this meets our comprehensive plan goals. So I think that's all I really need to say about this. We're going on long here tonight, so I'd like to push this back to the Planning Commission for discussion or open the public comment period, whatever you so choose.
Does anyone have any, starting from left to right this time? Commissioner Johnson?
I've recused myself from this
I
matter.
forgot about that, that's correct. But you can listen in, that's correct. Commissioner Peno?
No, I have nothing.
Okay. We'll open the public hearing portion of the public portion meeting regarding RZ 2021-038, Bucko request to change zoning designation of 5.2 acres of land from mixed commercial to residential 15. Let me start with our online participants. Please introduce yourself. You have 3 minutes or less. And Bill, can you introduce our first person? Because I really can't see through my bulletproof glass here.
And I'd like to mention it's 7:50 p.m.
Oh, I'm sorry. We are opening at 7:50 p.m. Thank you. Sorry about that. I am not in control of the online platform. I see we have people there. I have no control. Bill, can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Okay.
Everyone has the ability to unmute themselves.
Okay, so I believe we have a muting problem on all our participants.
Who's trying to speak?
I don't think anybody can speak. We're just here.
Okay, so no one would like to participate on our online population right now? Okay, I will move
And
it.
you're not talking about us, right?
We are.
Okay.
Yes.
Huh?
Yeah, we are talking about the Bucko Rezone right now. So yes, this would be your time to,
Oh, okay. Okay, I thought you were talking about anybody in the community who wanted to comment.
right now, we have a type of mixed type of situation where we have our online participants, such as yourself or anyone here in the audience. So I'm starting with my online participants first, so you would be up. Is that you, Sarah?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah,
so
it's me.
go ahead, introduce yourself, name,
yeah.
address.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
My name is Sarah Bucko. My address is 13315 Northwest Overton Street in Portland, Oregon. Just a couple things. I read the memo that was sent out to the Planning Commission, and I heard what John just had to say right now. One of the questions, or it's not a question really, he did say that this rezone would add 78 units more. And I just wanted to see the math on that. And what did you use for units in mixed commercial? Because we're not going from 0 to 78. Because in mixed commercial, I am allowed to have 8 units per building, and there's not a max, right? There's a max based on setbacks, but there's not a max of buildings that I can put on an acre. There is with setbacks, but so I wanted to know, did you assume that I was going to put 1 building per acre with 8 units above when you were calculating the units and how many more it was going to be adding population wise? Because the mixed commercial does allow for 8 units above. So that's why I'm, the whole part saying that it was going to skew the balance of residential homes. I think that we can still get the same density of units. I said this last time at the Planning Commission meeting. We can get the same density of units with our current zoning. We can have 60-foot tall buildings. I think that part of the argument is really a non-factor. It's just a different type of housing. It's apartments above retail commercial space instead of single family townhomes that people can buy or rent. So we're just talking about a different type of product. We're not talking about a huge increase in density. So I don't think that is that 78 units more that's not correct. So I did want to bring that up because it said, there's this whole calculation, but that's based on going from 0 units to 78. And that's not what the mixed commercial zoning is. It's not 0 units. So like I said last time, we're really just trying to bridge the gap and provide a different type of housing than we could with the mixed commercial. The other thing that another thing that was in the memo that was not correct was that in 2008, my grandfather submitted a rezone request for mixed commercial. That's a little bit off. In 2006, he submitted a rezone request. He had a buyer who wanted to put in a retirement home. And in 2006, just for your records, it's RZ-1-07 was the rezone request that he submitted in 2006. And he asked for the rezone for this builder developer to build a retirement home there. And he asked, as part of this rezone request, he asked for R15 as well for another parcel. For the other parcel. So it wasn't until 2009 that this happened. So that was, years later.
Ms. Bucko, just for 1 second, we're talking about the rezone from MC to R15, so the history really, that's secondary?
Well, yeah, but the history was in the memo, and it was erroneous, so I want to correct it.
Okay, that's fine, thank you.
So I guess, and the other thing, so the first thing in the memo, it highlights that, while our parcel of land does not have any frontage to any major roads right now, that is a part of the new arterial corridor project, we will. And I know I said in the last meeting that I kind of gave you a little bit of a history. When we submitted this rezone request, the arterial was not planned to intersect this parcel of land. So we turned in a complete preliminary plat. There was a scoping study, things got changed. Basically, they realized it was not feasible to do the road where they had planned it within the comp plan. So, we pivoted, and we have been working with the city to bring the arterial road on our land. So I guess I wanted to make it clear that when we submitted that this was not in the plan. And not only, this arterial road is only happening because we are going to dedicate the land to the city to do this arterial road. As part of our other project. So that's the only reason this arterial road is going right here. So it's, not only are we dedicating the land, but we're constructing the portion of the road from FNS Grade Road all the way down and around to Cook Road to bypass going through the school district property. So I'm just kind of going down based on the memo.
Ma'am, I only have 3 minutes for you, and we need to kind of move around.
I have 3 minutes.
We're already way past 3 minutes. So you'll have another
I thought
opportunity.
that the 3 minutes was only for public comment.
And these are your public
But I'm-
Well,
comments. Yes,
she's the owner.
Okay, that's fine.
I'm the owner.
Okay.
No, I
Yeah,
know,
so
I
it
know
does-
exactly
yeah,
who you
3 minutes
are.
only apply to, the 3 minutes don't apply to me. Correct.
I'll allow it. Continue on. I just,
Okay.
this is going to be a long process, I guess, is what we're talking about. And, to take a look at memos and now, start disputing different things, timing and stuff, it has nothing to do with what we're talking about right now. Let's focus on what your position
But
is on the R15.
the memo that was given to the planning commission was to address this rezone.
Correct.
Correct?
Yes.
It has everything to do with what we're talking about right now. I'm just addressing the memo that was given to the planning commission in regards to the rezone. So everything that the memo said is just what I'm addressing.
Okay, continue on.
Okay, thank you. And I think, and the memo goes on to concede that while there's a shortage of homes in Sedro-Woolley, there's not a shortage of land. I think that, this has already been touched on tonight in regards to the other rezone before me, but we're stressing so much about the comp plan and losing the commercial zoning. while there are lots of commercial projects going in, there's the two huge Uvmu going in with over 20,000 square feet of commercial space. And we don't have a shortage of commercial space. There's lots going in. We don't have a shortage. Meanwhile, we're kind of ignoring the housing crisis that we do have. So I think that in talking about all of this and reviewing it, at what point do we ask ourselves kind of where does the crisis exist? Do we need more brew pubs? Do we need more commercial land? Are we really needing more commercial
Ms.
space?
Bucko, this is a discussion for a totally different day, and it's 8:00 at night, and why I totally appreciate where you're coming from, but I need to focus on keeping moving forward here, because other people might have things to say, and we still have quite a bit on our agenda left.
I definitely understand, but we were discussing the Ruby rezone for an hour and a half. So, and we've been on this for 10 minutes, and you're telling me that I'm.
Yeah, I'm not looking to debate with you. I just like you to stay on topic here, and, we're not to discuss fair housing, things like that. Let's stick to the rezone from a 15, from a mixed commercial. That's all I'm asking.
All I'm doing is replying to the memo that was sent out in regards to the rezone. It specifically, the paragraph about spot zoning, I think is really unfair. I think that to call it spot zoning when there's a call to action with the state of Washington to allow these types of changes in density, there's mandatory, there was a flurry of Growth Management Act bills to address this issue, and so I think that I think that it's an unfair statement to suggest that this might be considered spot zoning. I don't think that this applies to our rezone request, and I think that it's, I don't think that it's.
Ma'am, the determinations are not subjective. Okay, there's criteria when staff looks at these individual areas to identify what something is and what something isn't. It's really that simple. It's not like somebody is like, hey, this just doesn't sound like a good idea. There's state code that they are required to abide by before a determination like that is not only made, but before something like this can even happen. So use it as an education process, if anything. And you have other options here as well. I mean, you went for a straight R15. We have other options within our code that in this particular case, it's going to be what it's going to be. So if we can just keep moving on, you had more comments on the memo here. And like I said, you're going to get a lot more opportunity to have a floor here to add into this conversation.
Yeah, and I would like a chance to add some into this as well. My name's Laura Bucko.
Okay, Laura, can you hang on one second? Sarah, Are you done? So I can move on to your sister?
Well, I mean, I do, I feel a little bit steamrolled that with the last rezone request, Bob Ruby got to get up there and talk.
Okay, but this is a process, okay? This is a process that you'll have plenty of time to keep adding into it. I'm just saying it's the public portion of it. You will absolutely have more opportunity to present your case, and I don't believe we're making any decisions tonight. So if we can just...
Yeah, but this is part of my opportunity, right? Tonight is part of my opportunity, just like Bob Ruby got up there and presented his case.
Sure,
And
have at it. It's okay.
Well, I'm just saying that I'm feeling like this is discriminatory, the way that you immediately cut me off while this meeting started at 6:30 and we got started at 7:50.
No, no, ma'am, it's just a
So-
process, and your sister was speaking, and all I did was politely ask you if you're
Okay,
done, so
okay.
she can continue, that's all.
Can I recommend that we just let Sarah go for a little while, please?
Sure, absolutely, as long as she would like.
Yeah, I just, so you're saying that at the next, that there's going to be another meeting and you would like me to talk about this at the next meeting?
Sarah, sorry for the confusion. I think it's appropriate to continue speaking, and we want to hear you.
Okay, that was all really confusing because I was told that this wasn't the time or place. Okay, so if Laura wants to go
Yeah,
in.
I'm wondering if we could come to me, since me and her would, if we were doing this in person, her and I would be standing up at the podium together and presenting this together. So if it's allowed, I will say that it in my opinion, it wasn't the best way to treat how she was saying going through the memo that your guys' commission put together, stating on the points of why you are opposed or not opposed to the rezone, and her going through each one of those bullet points to address those issues that you guys put together on a memo makes total sense. And yeah, you're right. There was a very long discussion on the Rudy project, and we were about, 10 minutes into that. So I understand her frustration. We would be up there together. So maybe I'll just say a few of my things and then give her a second, and then she can get back to her list. And if we're just kind of making this about like logistics of doing this rezone and why we want to do it, I think one of the biggest things and what we put on our application was that we want to be able to provide some of this middle housing, entry-level housing for the community. I think, like she said, we have to look at where the crisis lies. There is a lot of open commercial space. When you're talking about wanting to have a big box, Rite Aid or Thrifty Foods, Food Pavilion, the area that was sitting there, I'm not sure if it's still vacant. There's been a lot of opportunities for a big box to come to Sedro-Woolley, and it hasn't been there. Is that because the population isn't there? We don't know. But so we have a lot of population increase coming to Sedro-Woolley. There's big businesses that are starting in Sedro-Woolley, like Sedro Technologies, that are bringing a lot of employees into just Skagit County in general. So when you're looking at things like, say, the University of Washington's apartment market report of 2021, Skagit County is listed as the lowest vacancy rate of 0.3%. So on your 1-bedroom and 2-bedroom apartments, we have 2 vacancies for 1-bedroom apartments on this report and 0 vacancies on 2-bedroom apartments with this report. If you look at the population of Sedro-Woolley and the age, your 19 to 34-year-olds make up over half of Sedro-Woolley's population. At the current rate, with what housing prices are going at, entry-level houses are few and far between. I think anybody who lives in the community can state that. And so even in the solution of providing single-family homes, when people enter that market and buy an affordable single-family home, with the way that it's going, those homes are no longer affordable homes for entry level when those people go to sell those homes. So what we're trying to do is provide an invitation to people to join our community so that we can economically support all this commercial property that's going in through the current things that are happening, and giving people an entry-level price to be able to come in and join our community. And when, John, you said looking at this map, that you see that it doesn't really fit, and that it's a random area for apartment homes. I don't really think so. I think it's a really nice flow. We planned this on purpose. Like you said, your desire was to have 9.5 acres That's going to take about 6 to 7 parcels that somebody's going to have to come in and want to purchase 6 to 7 parcels to make that dream 9.5 acre commercial property that you have, in this plan. And I think similarly to what you guys, I appreciate the time. I understand that a lot of you guys, you're volunteering your time to do what's best for the community. And I think that's admirable. But you have to understand that things do change. You guys did do, a 5-year plan to have an arterial road go up through, have to knock out some of those buildings in the school zone. And you looked and you were like, wow, this is going to be really, really expensive to current code, have to rebuild these buildings. That's why this arterial road had to move in the first place. The same issues of cost of construction, infrastructure, development has skyrocketed. I think people are waiting like months and months for windows. So if somebody's going to come in, kind of like Paul Woodmansey said, and come in and look at what this 9.5 acre commercial zone that you'd like to create here, it doesn't pencil. It doesn't make sense. And no developer is going to come in and want to take that and make this a big mixed commercial space. So you have some of this in the front, some commercial space it's going to have an arterial road, it's going to have Cook Road, commercial space, makes sense. Behind it, multifamily, entry level. Then a little bit more, then you graduate into your single family homes. And I think the flow sounds really nice. I think that if you were to look, just like you were at your feasibility, at moving the road and the buildings, developers are facing that same problem. And I don't think that it's ever gonna turn into this commercial space that you're hoping for when the commercial space right across the street is not fully occupied. So if we're talking straight logistics, numbers, 0 vacancies for these type of homes, lots of vacancies for commercial space. I think that's like one of our main points that we're trying to drive home.
Is there anything else?
For me, I think I'm good.
Okay, Laura? Okay, can I move on to someone in the audience if you're done testifying? Okay.
Yeah,
Anyone in
thank
the
you.
audience would like to say a word? I thought so.
Thanks for that. My name's Paul Woodmansey, BYK Construction. Address is 702A Metcalf Street. I wrote a couple notes down. Just so you all know, I am partnering with the Bucko sisters on their R7 piece. We're doing 63 houses. We're really excited about that project. And I am working with them on this piece, although we don't have any type of contractual agreement with it together. I do want to say several things. I've heard the argument for a long time in multiple cities that we can't lose our commercial land, and their commercial land that's zoned commercial sits vacant longer and longer and longer. And I'm not talking about vacant buildings, I'm talking about vacant land that's untouched, undeveloped, and it sits there. You're losing tax revenue. Number 2 point, John asserted that the MC was a great transition from to have this as a mixed commercial into the R7 single family. I can attest multiple times, I've never had one of my residents who buy one of my single family houses in my R7 community say, I wish there was a grocery store right behind my house. It's never happened. R15 is a much better zone in order to have a nice transition. So you have Cook Road, you have 4 parcels between Cook Road and this 5 acre piece. All 4 of those parcels could be mixed use or mixed commercial. The Bucko sister 5 acre should be R15, which gives you the opportunity to do multifamily, and it also gives you the opportunity to do commercial. You can do community commercial projects in the R15 zone. And then so it's a great transition from Cook Road, mixed commercial, R15 into your single family homes, the R7 zone. Lastly, the mixed commercial zone does not stop you from building housing units in it. So the argument that the density goes up is not correct, in my opinion. In fact, I think I could figure out a way to do a lot of units on a mixed commercial with several different buildings not touching each other. So, and I just want to restate again, because I don't know how these work together. I think the mixed commercial zone needs changed. I think Commissioner Fatizzi, what you said earlier about you guys having the tools and being able to do that, 100%. You're alluding to that. You guys did a great job on the Uvmu. You did a great job on the PRD, and I think the mixed commercial zone can be reviewed by this committee and go to City Council, working with planning staff, and get a great zone that people will want to develop in. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Ruby.
Thank you for the opportunity to comment, and by the way, tomorrow is a full moon. I don't know how that affects this meeting, but it will occur. I'd like to speak in support of the rezone as it is. My name is Bob Ruby, 802 Metcalf Street. I think I'm here to comment as a member of Rubicon Development, which is the construction part. We've been here in the community for quite a while. And one comment that occurs to me, I worked years ago with John Coleman on a city council effort to rezone property. I had some at that time that was residential, and there was a request, or rather the city had asked to rezone residential to commercial. And in that instance, there was about 8 acres that was amalgamated in 3 different parcels. Aaron Berg was the city supervisor at that time, and very, very active in recruiting businesses. And the mayor at that time was Mike Anderson. What happened during that period was we, as a group, looked and looked, and we endeavored to attract that proverbial big box store. Quite an effort. I found some interesting things during that process. Number one, big box stores like to locate on I-5, and that may be regrettable. It was Mike Anderson during that period that acquiesced and said that we, Sedro-Woolley, are like an eastern Washington town. My property was bordering Cook Road, and we did not find interest. We looked at Safeway, who had been in the area, Freddy's, the list went on and on and on, and we couldn't even get Starbucks to return a call to us. So I guess just if my experience is of any interest to this group, the Bucko property, even with an arterial that goes through as a diversion, will not be the main traffic arterial east and west through town. I believe it will, in great measure, remain Cook Road. Maybe I'm wrong, but to the extent that it does, I am very, it does not seem to me that the kind of commercial area similar to what we see on Burlington Boulevard will appear there or on the Bucko property. I think that's unfortunate, but I just think that's the reality of the way those chains think. So I leave you with that. To me, that area of town, nestled with what surrounds it, appears to be multifamily, high density, or some kind of modest cost residential would seem to be, in my professional opinion, the best use of the property. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else that would like to make a comment on the Bucko property before I close the public meeting portion?
This is Rob Janicki, 103 North Township, Sedro-Woolley, Washington. I'm just going to say that I think this is a great change of rezone. I'm probably the largest owner currently of mixed-use commercial in the city, and I've had it sitting vacant for 21 years, pad ready. So big box ready. So I'd love to see something get built that is affordable housing, and it's unfortunate that you guys already hooked up with Paul, because he could have gave me a call anytime.
Yeah. I kind of know the dynamics going on in the audience tonight, so thank you. We'll all keep that in mind. Is there anything else, Rob, you'd like to add? Okay.
No,
Go ahead.
that's it.
Thank you. I will close. Anybody else? Okay, we will close the public meeting portion of the Bucko Rezone at 8:21. Now, I have a general question. Would we like to move on to the unfinished business, which is pretty deep, or do we want to kick that into the next meeting? And I'll take commentary
I'd like
from
to
anybody
make a
here.
comment on the Bucko. Can we talk about
Absolutely.
Bucko
Yeah,
a little bit
sure.
more? So I'd just like to thank the Bucko sisters for their comments this evening, and note that they are well taken, and I agree that there is a very immediate and real housing crisis. I, for one, have little interest in seeing big box stores on Cook Road. I would much rather see an increase in affordable housing. And I do believe that high-density residential would create a nice buffer in between the R7 and the mixed commercial properties that are there along Cook Road. And so, anyway, I'll leave it at that for this evening, but thank you for your commentary, and we'll work through this.
Thank you.
Anyone else?
Thank you.
Not you. Stacy?
I just wanted to say thank you for your input.
Okay. With that, would we like to move on to the UVMU parking regs, or is it something at 8:23 we'd like to take up at our next meeting? Your thoughts, or anybody else's thoughts here? Okay, let's continue on then. So the next unfinished business is the requested amendments to the UVMU parking regulations. So John, would you like to lead in here?
All right, let me switch my notes around here.
Exactly, same here.
Looking around to see who was here at the last meeting to see if there was a necessity for me to give an introduction or not on this. I'll give a brief introduction because I know some of the planning commissioners were not here at the last one for this. So the city received a request from the RJ Group jointly signed with BYK Construction, both Rob Janicki and Paul Woodmansey are representatives of those groups, and they're here today. The request is to change the parking regulations in two different ways. And the request is in attachment 1, so hopefully you had a chance to read that carefully and understand what the request is. So one is to allow commercial parking and residential parking to be shared in the urban village mixed use. Right now, the way our urban village mixed use regulations state is if you've got a mixed use commercial, you have to have enough parking for the residential use, which is calculated based on the number of units in that building and the type of unit, and how many bedrooms and all. And we have calculations in our Uvmu code that says how many parking spaces are required to accommodate that number of units and bedrooms. In addition, you have to provide commercial parking for the commercial aspect of the building. And it's additive. So you've got your residential plus your commercial added up to a total of, X plus Y equals Z. Their request is to allow overlap of the residential and the commercial. So, and for the reasons stated in their request, I'll let you read through that. The request is, for all intents and purposes, during the day, people that live there will be away at work, and so their cars will not be in the parking lot. And during the day, commercial is open in the building downstairs. So since there's open spaces in the residential parking, they should be allowed to share it with commercial. So instead of having it X plus Y equals Z, it's X plus Y equals something else. It's not additive, it's overlapped. I'm sorry, I started down an analogy road and I didn't have the analogy fully thought out. So staff did a little analysis of this, and this is something that other jurisdictions do, not in Skagit County, but in Bellingham, they do. We also did some research into how this is referred to as shared parking. So we did some research into how shared parking works industry-wide. And so looking at, Nicole looked at information from the, what is this? It's the Southwest Advisory Planning Committee, and they got their information from another regional planning organization. And so what we're seeing is it can be done, and it is recommended in some cases. But there's kind of a lot of caveats to it. So in our memo, we pointed out some of the benefits and some of the problems of shared parking. I don't necessarily want to go through all of it, but I'll hit a couple of the highlights. So, for example, under the challenges part, and it also gives solutions to those challenges. One of the things that I was saying is, if there's not overflow parking in the area, it becomes problematic. There are some solutions listed in here. I did point out that aside from the on-street parking in this area, there is no overflow parking available. There is some concern historically. There's across the street, there's the ballparks, and when there's a game on, all of Stendhal Street will be completely filled with cars for people that are using that. Not saying that there's not solutions, I'm just pointing out some of the realities of this particular situation here. There is a little bit of parking on being provided with, on-street parking being provided with these facilities, the two urban village projects that are that are being developed right now. So there may be a lot of competition, so we may say, for those on-street parking spaces. So overflow is an issue. And then some of these things are lesser issues, like working out an agreement between landowners can be tricky. Yeah, okay, we get that. But this is, and, you know, that's up to the developers to figure out that's the solution. Sometimes there's deed restrictions, so if we do go down that road, I would like to make sure that there's not deed restrictions in a way that would cause a problem. So there's pros and cons to the shared parking. I think if you recall, when the Planning Commission reviewed the urban village parking standards, we had quite a bit of a conversation about this, and staff did at the time say, you know, it is feasible to do the overlap. But that's not what the Planning Commission or the City Council chose to do. So that's why we are where we are today. So that's one part of their request. The second part is to allow any parking that the developer creates on street, not on site, but on street, on the right of way, to be counted towards the counted towards the required parking for the overall development. Again, we looked into what other jurisdictions do, and with the exception of Bellingham, nobody locally in Skagit or Whatcom allow that kind of use. Staff still has concerns about overflow and other users taking up that space, and just, you know, it looks like we haven't had legal weigh in on it, but, you know, that's the right-of-way parking spaces are owned by the city. So to allow it to be counted towards a private development is problematic, because it kind of looks like gifting of public funds, saying, you know, like, oh, this is this is city land, but the local private developer gets to use it for their project. So it's not an insurmountable hurdle, but it certainly doesn't look good, and nobody locally does that. Bellingham does their own kind of thing with all of these. Now, as I pointed out in the memo, Bellingham has a different sort of scenario where they have transit, they have a lot of large-scale development happening in their downtown. They have on-street parking nearby in their downtown area, kind of all around. It's just, we're just in a different scenario here. So staff doesn't recommend the use of on-street parking to be counted part of that. I think that's, you know, it's late, so I'll try to keep my comments short. If you have any questions, I'll leave it at that.
You know, I went down there today with a laser rangefinder because I was curious myself. And by the way, the RJ project's looking really nice. There's no room there. Okay, there really isn't. When you're going down Hodgen, okay, your left-hand side, the western boundary is a drainage ditch, so you got a little bit of place to park there. And according to the laser rangefinder, it was barely 27 feet wide to the sidewalk. So I don't even know how you could even put, outside of that one section on Hodge, and maybe off to the left there, you can do some on-street parking. But when you come in and you make that hard 45 down Stendhal, okay, you literally, it's nothing. I mean, it's I want to say, I shot the rangefinder from the drainage ditch that if I took one more step, I'm down 4 feet. I'm going for a swim. Okay, it's only 36 feet to a fire hydrant. If you're looking at a parking space between 7.9 and 9 feet wide by 10 feet, I don't even know how an Amazon truck could even turn down there. Now, I do understand certain things were situational, like the BYK side is different. But on that southern border of your site, it's all open drainage ditch. So you really have no way to park there anyway, unless you do something to dark out that whole section and do something there. So, I don't know, you had some comments on this, and if you don't mind, because you had something situational, so I'll allow it to explain exactly what you're talking about, because I thought they were just two different situations. Yours was a site-specific thing versus RJ, which was totally different than your project. But you had some real common sense reasons as to why you needed more parking to accommodate the commercial portion, which when I do the calculation, it's still not a lot of commercial space required as far as parking. We got, well, one space, if you go 50% or higher on the commercial side, every 600 square feet. I mean, that's maybe 10 spaces for 6,000 square feet
Yeah, we have more parking requirement than that,
on the residential portion.
and on the commercial portion. We have, I want to ask a question. Is this going to be part of the overall record, what I say right now?
Yeah,
So-
I guess so. Go ahead.
Yeah, how, like,
Because I can answer his question now if you want, but it's kind of part of what I was going to have on the overall record, so.
so this isn't a public hearing.
Right.
This is,
This is an FYI kind of thing.
yeah,
I don't know how we handle that.
I can FYI during my public comment period if you want.
Okay, well,
Up to you.
that's fine too.
Whatever you want.
just maybe keep it organized, so maybe we have the planning commission have a discussion, and then, have Paul and Rob available to answer questions
Okay,
that you might have.
yeah,
So
like I said,
Keep my comment organized or sit down and come back up?
Well, let's see what why don't you sit down, and let's see if we can get this organized.
take a seat, right.
Instead of you coming up every time they have a question, maybe we can.
So my question was on that, their site-specific issues per the letter, because I don't see those same issues existing with the larger project on the RJ Group's project. And again, I can't even find any on-street parking anyway, that they'll overflow onto that to begin with, if there is any. You know, it would be really helpful to see site plans for both of these projects, because we do not have that.
I sent mine in before the meeting.
Okay, I would love to see that at our next meeting if we bring this up again. I have no idea how these sites are looking.
So is there any planning commission discussion or questions before we?
The floor is open.
The question that I have is exactly how does the shared parking agreement arrangement function? Is there certain stipulations that are put upon the residents? I mean, an example is, so I get the whole general concept of, I am a resident there, I park there in the evening because I live there, and then my 9 to 5, I'm gone during the day, and that commercial space, or that commercial manager, whoever can seize upon that and use that for his customers or employees or what have you. But let's say that I'm not working 9 to 5 in an office, and I'm home working remotely. I work for Amazon, and I'm there all the time. Is there some sort of requirement that I skedaddle my car for 8 hours a day and open that up? Or, exactly what are the parameters of that? I mean, obviously it's not here in Skagit, so it's kind of a brand new concept. And I could, change happens very slowly in Woolley, and I know that people will be very vocal if it doesn't flow into their lifestyle. And another point that I have concerns about is the on-street parking. I know that's right next to school land. I can say from an insider's perspective that there's no, like the plans that are there with the school district are like tentative. Like we're talking years out. So obviously there's nothing written in stone. But that land's going to get used eventually by the school district. It's just a matter of time and circumstance. And I know that Janicki Fields is a great facility. It's a great amenity to the community, and it gets a lot of use. And I can imagine that use is potentially going to actually increase, particularly with all these, new residents that are potentially going to be moving into the district and the city. So I'd imagine parking it in general between, BYK's project and RJ's and, future school district or future school facility there, plus increased usage of Janicki Fields, as much public parking, if I'm saying on-street parking and public parking is synonymously here, but as much public parking as possible, moms and dads they're gonna demand that. But Commissioner Fatizzi is absolutely right. The streets there are so narrow that kind of limits on-street parking unto itself too. So I just see, a lot of issues. I don't think that they're necessarily insurmountable, but I think it definitely needs to be something that needs to be fleshed out a little bit more.
Onto that with the kids using the athletic fields. So where you make that 45-degree turn coming off of Hodgen, that's now a retention pond. And I think they have an indoor house there that they practice batting and stuff like that. Well, now they have to walk through the retention pond because you're not going to be able to get over there anymore. So that's going to be closed down. So they're going to have to actually drive on to Cook, park there because that's going to be all cut off. That's going to be a big old retention pond right there. And you can just see their foot tracks going through now. But eventually they're not going to be able to do it because that's where all the stormwater is going right now. So that's cut off from them. I don't know. I haven't, like I said, I haven't seen the plans. No.
That's gone.
Yeah. So like I said, that's what I haven't seen the plans. So, but that's what the kids are doing now. Anyone else? So at this point, I mean, we'll just, Paul, would you like to comment? Is Rob still here? No,
I'll let RJ Group go first.
Okay. Mr. Janicki.
Actually, my name is Scarlett Ponder. I am a project manager for the RJ Group, and I have some comments to share on this. So the comments I have were actually from Devin Keynes, who submitted this revision on behalf of the RJ Group and BYK Construction. So I'm speaking from her notes. And so this revision request, the first thing I want to address is that the intent of the Uvmu overlay overall is to encourage commerce by creating a pedestrian-friendly environment that will accommodate shoppers and residents. That's a quote directly from the code. You might recognize it. And the shared parking agreement that we're proposing to address the issue. Sorry, clear my throat here. So currently the way the code is written, the parking requirements result in I would say more parking than is actually needed for these I'm so sorry. So the current parking requirements are restrictive to meeting the intents of the Uvmu. So right now, the result is unnecessarily large expanses of parking that take up significant space. And having a large expanse of parking is kind of achieves the opposite of what the intent of the Uvmu is, which is to create a pleasant pedestrian experience. So basically, the shared parking agreement would be a flexible and elegant solution which would allow for residential users and commercial users to share a predetermined number of spaces. This number of spaces would be determined by identifying what those peak times for commercial and residential are. That's something that's fairly easy to extrapolate. And basically, it would just mean there'd be a certain number of parking spaces that would be clearly marked. And during peak commercial times, they would be available for commercial users. And during the peak residential times, they would be available for the residential users. And basically, the actual amount of parking spaces and that agreement would be something that would be approvable at the discretion of the planning director. So it would allow for a conversation between the developer and the city as to what the appropriate number of shared spaces are, so you could optimize that use of space. I'm going to let Rob speak to the on-street parking element, but as far as the shared use parking agreements, this is something that's been used in municipalities all over the country. It's widely recognized as a best practice for having efficient use of space for parking. Cities as diverse as San Diego, North Kansas City, Nashville, West Hartford, Connecticut, all over the country. This is something that's been used. It's very flexible to meet the needs of the specific context. And I think allowing for this flexibility would just add an extra, it would just increase the flexibility for developers and the city of Sedro-Woolley to appropriately meet parking needs while still meeting the intent of the overlay, which is as it's to provide a more pedestrian-friendly experience. And that's something that's very difficult to do if you have rigid parking requirements. So this shared, allowing shared parking agreements just adds that additional flexibility to address those parking needs while still maintaining the intent of the overlay.
You know, just to give you a little bit of background here, and your group was involved in this from the beginning. When you have you're bringing up like the overall like UVMU, what would be great if we were in like a city of Seattle or San Diego and all the places you brought up. We're kind of landlocked here, so all you're going to have is people driving less. Okay, it doesn't mean they don't need to drive. We want them to drive. We want them to be able to go to even pick up groceries. So where the UVMU is geographically, you're separated from a whole bunch of different things. And depending on what you put in commercially, yeah, that would be great to keep people anchored within those 40 acres. That'd be wonderful. But as far as the parking goes, there's always an ebb and flow, and you're right. Okay, you know, you have the commercial side, you have people going into work or doing whatever, and then you have people in their residences. But as far as those numbers, we have experience in town with other projects, and they're pretty spot on. So utilizing, the issue here is utilizing city parking outside of this to be included in the density. The problem with that is you're always going to have overflow. Okay, it isn't, especially at nighttime and weekends, people come by, they visit. So again, we don't really have a lot on the streets there to even begin with, in order also to accommodate all the athletic facilities that are on the other side. So it's a little bit more than that. And, you know, UVMU, depending on where you're at, they could be incorporated in different ways. But in our experience, as far as parking goes, yeah, if you want that level of residential, you're going to have people, one-bedroom apartments where you have a couple, they have 2 cars. So all these things need to be considered. So again, thank you for your comment. And Mr. Janicki, you're up next to talk about the on-street component.
Thank you. So just to get a little background on the street, Stendhal Street and Hodgins Street were both owned by the developer, which was me at the time. So I just want to make sure we understand that there was no, we're not looking for a gift. We owned it and we gifted it to the city, or they took it, depending on how you look at it. So all of that was private land, and we were required to, or requested to put that street in. We didn't want to put the street. We considered the entire thing a commercial property. You don't need streets inside commercial, but they required that as part of their negotiations with us. The street is only a half street because I, at the time, did not own the land to the west. And so we were only required to do 3/4 street improvements. The redesign, that if you notice, the sidewalk has been removed as part of the development because we had to redesign it so that we could make it have on-street parking. And when the remainder of the street is built, there'll be parking both sides. And this will be parking that currently does not exist. So Paul Woodmansey's request was when you're in downtown Sedro-Woolley, which by the way requires no parking for residential, but that's a different issue. When you're downtown, those parking spots are very, very important because they're existing businesses, there's multiple owners. When you start adding residential in those areas, you're putting a lot of pressure on those existing parking stalls. In this particular case, the parking does not exist. The developer will create brand new street parking that did not exist. And the ditch on the north side next to the school, we're in negotiations to, on their behalf, rebuild that as part of our future phases and add an additional parking lot on school property that will be built by the developer on behalf of the school district that will be used for overflow parking for the school district, that I will have a shared, hopefully, parking agreement with them since I'm going to build it. And the final thing is on the on-street parking, in order for our development to be successful, we also do market studies, and we have multiple mixed-use apartment buildings and mixed-use projects that we've done in multiple jurisdictions. And in this particular case, because we will be owning both the commercial and the residential, it is to our benefit to have enough parking. Most jurisdictions that we work in, their zoning does not require us to have the amount of parking we want. So we might only have to do 100 parking stalls, but we'll do 150 because that's what the market wants. So we feel like since we're gonna, there's all kinds of conflicts that can happen when you have multiple owners. In this UVMU zone, there's basically Paul Woodmansey and us. Paul is doing his on-street improvements. I'm doing my on-street improvements. We're gonna own the project and we're gonna set up these shared parking agreements with the intention of being successful. So I don't think this is your, the UVMU code is not everywhere in the city, it's just here. And so I don't think this is setting a precedent for downtown or somewhere else. This is just here. I'm gonna probably put in at least 50 or 60 on-street parking stalls that don't exist today. I'm going to be adding and then interior, we want to have a surcharge of parking, an overflow of parking that allows people to have a place to park where they don't have to park on the street. And the only time that people should have to park on the street is a major sporting event, which we hope will be traffic into our commercial. So we want those people to park on the street and walk to the ball fields. So I think, as Scarlett said, we think of this as a flex tool for the planning director to have the negotiations with the developer. This is not a one size fits all, we're going to reduce the number. I love John's failed analogy. X plus Y, and he couldn't figure out what Z was. It's exactly the case because it would be a negotiated agreement. Planning director would be looking at for us for traffic information, for peak flow information, and we would have to provide that information in order for him to make a discretionary decision. So we don't see this as a vacuum where we get to just come up with a shared parking agreement that is whatever we want. It has to be approved by the planning director at his discretion, which gives a kind of a backstop to make sure that we don't have a free-for-all on this. And in terms of the on-street parking, we're talking about 50 or 60 stalls that currently don't exist that will get built. So I see Paul's point in that you're building something that doesn't exist. You should at least get a one-time credit for it. And then as time goes on and it gets used by other users, you know, that might, they may not get that same, they shouldn't get the credit because they didn't actually create something from nothing. I appreciate your time.
You know what would be helpful? Like I said, we have none of this data. All I have is a letter and, you know, a couple of things like a solution, maintain required parking by allowing developers to pay for other spaces for public parking. That UVMU is off by itself. So you just brought up a whole bunch of things that we don't have any of that documentation here. So it's very difficult to make a decision for any of us to really wrap our heads around the numbers to make sure the city gets the right thing, and there's requirements that the city has to, they're compliant with legally. So like I said, we're working with an incomplete data set. Would anybody else like to comment on that?
Well, we would love to come back and meet with you and give you a more definitive concept. We have a concept plan for the entire project with parking requirements. We tend to not want to share that because the marketplace destroys future plans almost as soon as you build them. But we're not doing this from a vacuum, and we can definitely share it with you as long as you understand it will evolve. As parking evolves, we're doing projects at Bellingham where we expect that there's a new concept called Share Ride, where people can basically have a pickup truck or a van that will be parked in the parking lot, and you just have an application. You click on your application, the car becomes available to you. You take it to Fred Meyer in Burlington, you get your groceries, you bring it back. Somebody else can use the car. That type of technology already exists and is being used to reduce parking requirements.
Yeah, my daughter's
So
at
what we're
Western.
doing is
Yeah, my daughter's at Western. They do that now.
Right,
they have that
right.
app.
So what
Yeah,
we're
and
doing
the
is
city
we're
provides it.
going to build these big parking lots with the anticipation that they're just placeholders for additional villages, because we think the parking is going to continue to be reduced, but temporarily it's going to go up. Because I agree with you that what we don't want is we don't want to have somebody who is paying rent in our project that comes home from work and can't find a place to park because a tournament is happening across the street. That's not acceptable to us either, and we want to come up with a plan. And we believe that one of the biggest issues with this site is those ball fields, because they create huge surges in parking requirements. And so we are already in discussions and have already talked with the school district about building a south end parking lot. They don't have a parking lot on the south side of their property. And so we're in negotiations with that, and we're hoping that if we build these parking stalls that we can somehow utilize that as a secondary shared parking. In the meantime, I think you guys need a lot more data, and what we would like to propose is that Scarlett can put together if it's okay with you guys, we would put together a package showing you kind of a master plan of the entire area. We would include the Woodmansey's future plans, and then see if we can come up with a game plan that shows why this shared parking arrangement is going to work on what we're trying to do there.
Comments? I think that would be great. Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry. Yeah, actually, you're the boss.
So, Rob, this is John. I think what we've seen from the requested zoning change that you submitted is a lack of specificity. So, and lack of detail. So based on what you're saying, you're working on ways to address overflow issues and some of the other flies in the ointment when it comes to the overall concept of shared parking agreements, which are, in my memo, Nicole put together several issues that need to be addressed a little bit more in detail. So if you could, along with what you're suggesting, that master plan of shared parking, kind of explaining where the parking is going to go and how you're going to manage it. If you could also have a revised, updated version of the code update, because it's going to need to be a lot more detailed, in order for the planning commission to be able to, lean towards approving it.
Oh, and, okay, well, why don't we take this offline? I'm not sure what additional detail. We purposely left it vague so that it could be at the discretion of the planning director, assuming that having that discretion would allow the planning director to have a more project-specific discussion. But if you guys want more detail, we can definitely do that.
Yeah, well, yeah, we can have a meeting sometime.
Okay.
Okay, so before I let both of you go, what would be great for us is when these projects are completed in the near future. Oh, go ahead, Paul, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Paul Woodmansey, 702A Metcalf Street, owner of BYK Construction. I do want to, just a couple topics, just from the discussion that I want to point out, and then I'm going to jump into our project-specific thing that we are dealing with. The ability to give your planning director discretion in this is huge, and because you guys have a fantastic planning director who's really intelligent, and at the same time, actually, protects the city too. And so, you guys should just give him that kind of discretion, okay? Because
he has a lot more discretion.
By no means does he, have any of us developers in his pocket. There's a lot of things that John and I disagree on every single day. So, but we work through it, and in the end, what John says is what happens. So, the city, another comment that was been made is that some other cities in our jurisdictions don't do shared parking. I just want to be very clear on shared parking. There's a few different ways. There's shared parking with intermixing the commercial and residential parking on our site specifically. And then there's shared parking like Rob's talking, like off street, hey, I need a couple more spots. I'm going to build this and I'm going to do a joint thing that the school's going to need as well, and that's how I fill my parking requirement, okay? They're two different kind of things for sure, but the city of Burlington does allow shared parking when you work in their C1 zone, which is very similar to our CBD zone here or our Uvmu zone. And so, and I'm pretty sure, don't quote me on it, but I'm pretty sure it's a 35% reduction in the required commercial spaces, okay? So if I needed 100 residential spaces, I have to have all those. If I needed 20 commercial spaces, if I'm gonna call it shared parking, I can take 35% of my 20 commercial spaces I needed and reduce them. And that's a really great way to reduce how many parking spots we have on site that end up getting filled with vagrant people. We've towed 5 cars off our parcel at Rita's, downtown 48, that were not tenants of ours, and they were not Sedro employees. And we've had 2 times where during the day we have a lot of parking stalls open, a lot. We've had 2 times where we've had to call the cops in order to have them come and remove people from the site who were definitely not doing things they should be doing on our property. So
one
having a
question-
lot of open property and parking sometimes is a challenge for management, so.
Yeah, on that Burlington property in their
Yeah.
C1, do they, when they reduce that to like a 35%, like Shoreline does it by the RTA stations, so they'll reduce their parking requirement for their residential based upon the proximity to a transit center.
Yeah, that's not what I'm talking about.
Okay.
I'm talking a reduction in the commercial required parking.
Okay.
Because of the whole thought that during the day, commercial can use the residential parking stalls that are vacant.
Yeah,
Okay?
that's why we need to see plans, because it'll tell me how much commercial space we can look at the code, and, everybody here knows what they're looking at as far as numbers go.
Yeah.
Because I'm looking more of heavier on residential components
Yeah.
on both of these projects versus the commercial.
Yeah.
So unless you actually see it in front of you, and this is what John alluded to earlier, we really need to see the details.
So
We
on
understand
Friday,
details.
yeah, I sent that in at about 6:15 today.
Okay, so that
So
wasn't-
I sent in all 4 site plans, a landscape plan that I previously submitted. I got comment and civil plan. I got comments back that I needed 14 more stalls. We went back and forth. I finally submitted a new site plan with 14 more stalls and less landscaped areas. So, and that's my site-specific thing I want to talk about. As of right now, there is no street parking allowed. I took pictures today. There's signs all up and down that road that say,
Nothing.
"Do not park on this road." The city of Sedro-Woolley has got to get their parking situation under control on their own first, in my opinion. Because if there's nobody out and about saying, "Hey, you're in the right of way, you need to get out of here," that needs to start happening. We have the same problem at downtown 48, and some of our tenants have a second vehicle that we don't allow them to park on our site. But I can't tell somebody they can't own a second vehicle, and they park in the right of way right next to E&E, and E&E can't tow them away because it's right away. The city needs to tow those people away, and they need to be told, get rid of your extra car.
Every night, there's 15 cars there, every single night.
Every single night.
Every single night.
And that's a city of Sedro-Woolley problem, that if there's a parking attendant or parking enforcement, that would be taken care of.
I thought it was a fire zone, actually, because there's a lot of combustibles in that warehouse.
Okay, so lastly, I don't want to take up too much time because I did send this in a letter, and you'll be able to look at my site plans, okay? On my site at the Uvmu, our trail road project, we have 65 units. Our requirement for parking for that 65 units is 100 stalls for our residential side. 29 of those stalls are in a parking garage underneath the building, okay, on the ground level. And those are only parking for the residents. So 29 of our 65 units have a reserved spot in a parking garage. Our commercial space, which is 11,760 square feet, we're being required to have 40 stalls in that. And for 11,000 square feet, 40 stalls is a lot, okay? So there's no doubt that there's an ebb and flow. We've talked about that a lot between commercial and residential. And it's been proven time and time again that a shared agreement between those work. I'm not asking for a reduction in my residential parking at all. I need the residential parking for my tenants, because if I don't have that, people aren't going to want to live in my building. If I don't have enough commercial parking, I'm not going to keep my commercial tenants in my building either. What we design and we plan and design to get people using these buildings and paying us rent. That's why we do it, right? And if I have nobody happy living in my building and nobody happy renting my commercial space, then I won't be a happy landlord. So I have to design to the market and what they want. In this site-specific spot, just like Rob is saying, we are actually widening the road. We're taking the existing sidewalk and curb line out. We're widening the road and creating 14 new parking stalls on the city right away that we are building ourselves, okay? When I did my first application, we counted those 14 stalls in our initial parking count. You have to, when you look at the site plan, you'll see those stalls are right on the frontage of our commercial building. So our building has commercial all on the frontage, And when you have somebody who's coming to use a commercial space, they want to park as close as possible to that front door. So they're all going to be using those spaces. There's no doubt about that. What we can do, though, is if we manage that, we're able to manage it, we can tell our tenants not to park there. If we are not allowed to manage it because it's city right away, then we can't tell our tenants not to park there.
Is
There's
that
a
on the Trail
problem
Road?
there.
Is that on the Trail Road side?
That's on the Stendal side.
So what are you going to do? Pave over that ditch and come on out?
The ditch will eventually get filled. The stormwater that's in there is part of our design will be infiltrated in the ground. So that will all get filled up. We'll be building 14 spaces that the city gets for free. We build them for free, but then we get no use out of them in terms of our planning, and we get no benefit outside of the city has spaces in front of our building that they don't manage. That's a problem, okay? Because we had to move these 14 spaces on our site, instead of being able to count them from the off-street parking, or on-street parking, sorry, we had a reduction of 3,000 square feet of our green space. That's a reduction of 23% of the park we had planned. We had a really nice park, and you'll see that on the site plans when John is able to send you over the document. In my opinion, I'd rather have green space for my tenants than have 14 extra stalls that will never be used, or 14 extra stalls that I have to tell a tenant you can't park there, or 14 extra stalls that I got to tow away people that shouldn't be parking on my property to begin with. If there's a problem, I've never been there during a baseball game. I've only been there for soccer games, and those are Everby Park's on the other side on Cook Road. But if that road is full of cars from baseball games, that's a problem already. And it will be a problem because people will be going to those baseball games and they'll be parking on my property, especially when I'll have 14 extra stalls that I definitely didn't need. So, in my opinion, you have a very smart planning director. I really think you can give him a lot of discretion in this UVMU, and that's how I'm going to leave the discussion.
I thought he has a lot of discretion to begin with. Thank you.
Yep.
So what happens when our planning director goes somewhere else and he's replaced by somebody who's not so wise and principled as he is?
Wise and principled, I like that, yeah.
You take away the discretion, I guess.
I'd just like to say that parking is like one of the least efficient ways that we could use land. We have all sorts of, documentation of a housing crisis and everything else. And I, for one, would like the developers to be able to have some flexibility in their parking arrangements and be able to provide more green space and other things like that in lieu of extra parking spots that are required based on, some particular formula that may or may not be actually relevant to the situation. And so, in theory, I'm in favor of this changing of the code.
This is the first time we got a lot more details than were contained in that letter. So when you see a letter like that and you're missing all the real stuff. Okay, we could talk about UVMUs until we're blue in the face of what a great idea it is, but it needs to apply for what we have going on here in Sedro-Woolley. So it is a site-specific type of, concept. But we got a lot more tonight than we had in anything. And like I said, I walked both properties today. I'm like, how's this going to happen? Because now we only got 3/4 of a street, which explains as to why everything's so narrow. So I was like, okay, there you go. Anybody else? Is there a motion to adjourn? So We need some
So
more.
moved.
You have to
Seconded.
make a motion. We have a motion to adjourn, a second by Commissioner Johnson. Meeting is adjourned at 9:14. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks.